If you flip a coin, you expect it to land on heads or on tails.
Right, yeah, obviously.
But what you don't expect is for that coin to bounce off the table and just like perfectly balance on its very edge.
Yeah, that would be a literal statistical anomaly.
Exactly. But, I mean, if you were watching the 2026 World Cup Group E opener on Sunday, June 14th, that is exactly what you saw.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into a match between Côte d'Ivoire and Ecuador that basically defied every single law of probability.
It really did.
We're talking about a game defined by absolute margins. I mean, millimeters of metal, 27 total shots, and this wild 90th minute sequence that literally shifted the balance of global football power.
And it's funny because it happened at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia, which just added to the incredible atmosphere.
So our mission today is to figure out exactly how a highly anticipated, rigid defensive stalemate suddenly turned into an end-to-end tactical thriller.
Yeah, it was a completely mesmerizing 90 minutes. And to give you, the listener, the complete picture of how this happened, we're pulling from a massive stack of sources today.
We've got a lot to cover.
We do. We're synthesizing the official FIFA match reports, the highly emotional post-match press conferences from both managers, and some incredible analytical breakdowns from beIN Sports, Kel Now, and the Tribune.
Oh, we also have that tracking data, right?
Right, yeah, the player-specific tracking data from Crypto Briefing. We're using that to really get under the hood of the tactical adjustments.
I was actually looking at some of that data before we started, and what strikes me right away is the massive disconnect between what everyone thought this game would be and what it actually was.
Oh, it was night and day.
Yeah. So I want to start by looking at those pre-match predictions versus the starting reality. Because if you read the room going into this, nobody was expecting fireworks.
Not at all. If you trace this back to the qualifying rounds, the narrative surrounding this match was built entirely on, pure defensive solidity.
Yep.
Let's look at Ecuador first. They arrived in North America having just survived the CONMEBOL qualifying gauntlet.
Which is brutal.
It is. For the listener, CONMEBOL is the South American Football Confederation, and its qualifying process is widely considered the most grueling in the world.
Yeah, you're dealing with massive travel distances, extreme changes in altitude.
Exactly. Like playing in the thin air of La Paz in Bolivia one week and then the heat of Brazil the next, all against some of the most technically gifted teams on Earth.
So just surviving that is an achievement. But they didn't just survive it. I know they came in with a strong reputation, but just how good was their defense during that campaign?
Historically good. I mean, they played 18 matches in that qualifying cycle, and they conceded a grand total of 5 goals.
Wait, 5 goals in 18 games?
5 goals in 18 games, and they kept 13 clean sheets.
That is just an absurd metric.
It really is. They built a defensive system that basically functions like a sieve designed to only let sand through. They'll let opposing teams pass the ball harmlessly around the middle of the pitch all day.
Right, they don't care about that possession.
Exactly. But the moment a team tries to push a striker into the penalty box, the gaps instantly close. They came into this World Cup on a 19-match unbeaten streak because of that structural discipline.
But the wild thing is, the team standing on the other side of the pitch had a resume that was arguably even more intimidating.
Oh, absolutely.
Côte d'Ivoire went through the CAF qualifiers, that's the African Confederation, which has its own brutal, unpredictable knockout structures, and they didn't concede a single goal.
Yeah, 0 goals.
Not one. They played 10 matches and walked away with a perfect 0 in the goals against column.
Which perfectly explains the media consensus prior to kickoff. When you have two teams whose entire footballing identities are built on a, defense-first philosophy, those systems usually cancel each other out.
Yeah, you expect a really boring game.
Right. Pundits on TNT Sports were predicting a narrow 1-0 win for Ecuador, and their top betting recommendation was literally both teams not to score.
Wow.
Tactically, it makes perfect sense. Neither team wants to commit players forward and risk getting caught on a counterattack.
Right, so the stage is set for a quiet, cautious game. But then the team sheets drop about an hour before kickoff. And Immerse Faye, the manager for Côte d'Ivoire, submits a starting lineup that completely scrambles everyone's notes.
It was a shock, yeah.
I know they were dealing with some injuries, but what was the actual structural shift Faye made here?
Well, the first major shift was forced by injury. Evan Ndicka, who plays his club football for Roma in Italy, is the absolute bedrock of their central defense. And he was ruled out with a thigh injury.
Oh, that's a massive loss.
Huge. That forced Faye into a major reshuffle. He had to bring in Wilfried Singo and Emmanuel Agbadou to operate as the two center backs in a 4-2-3-1 formation.
So immediately, that perfect defensive record from qualifying is suddenly relying on a totally new central partnership. That alone is stressful.
Yeah.
But it was the other end of the pitch that really caught my eye. Amad Diallo, who plays for Manchester United and was Côte d'Ivoire's top scorer during their 2025 Africa Cup of Nations victory. I mean, he's their guy.
He's their talisman.
Right. But Faye drops him to the bench. He starts Bazoumana in the number 10 role instead, that crucial creative position sitting just behind the main striker.
It was a very bold move.
To a casual observer, benching your most proven goal scorer right before the biggest game of his life looks like tactical suicide. What is the actual logic behind a move like that against a defense as good as Ecuador's?
It's a massive gamble, but it is rooted in game theory. When you start a highly technical, slightly smaller player like Ahmad against a physical, bruising South American defense from minute one, you run a huge risk.
Like he just gets bullied off the ball.
Exactly. You run the risk of him getting completely battered and isolated. The defenders are fresh, the tactical shape is perfect, and Ahmad could easily spend 60 minutes just chasing shadows.
Right, that makes sense.
So by keeping him on the bench, Faye is betting that the game will eventually stretch out. He's predicting that in the 70th or 80th minute, when Ecuador's legs get heavy and their defensive lines start to fray, introducing an elite, fresh problem solver into that chaos will be devastating.
It's fascinating because if that strategy fails and they lose 1-0 without Ahmad ever making an impact, Faye gets completely crucified by the global press.
Oh, he'd be fired the next day.
Totally. And it also meant he was fielding an incredibly inexperienced team. The stats show this was the youngest starting 11 Côte d'Ivoire has fielded in a World Cup since 2006.
Average age was just over 26 years old.
And if you've ever played a sport or even just had to give a massive presentation at work, you know what adrenaline does to your decision-making. You rush. You hesitate. Now multiply that feeling by 33 million people watching back home.
And that psychological weight heavily dictated the flow of the first 45 minutes, because you are exactly right about the adrenaline. Faye actually addressed this directly in his post-match press conference. What did he say? He pointed out that out of his 26-man squad, not a single player had ever played a minute of World Cup football before. Faye said, there was some doubt, there was some fear, they were afraid to take risks.
So if the Ivorian players are hesitant, how does a veteran, highly organized team like Ecuador exploit that? Because watching the first half, it felt like Ecuador was just suffocating them.
They exploited it by turning up the dial on their pressing mechanics. A lot of people hear the word pressing and just assume it means running really hard at the player with the ball.
Right, just maximum effort.
But Ecuador's press is a highly coordinated trap. When an Ivorian defender received the ball, the Ecuadorian forwards wouldn't just sprint directly at him. They would curve their runs to intentionally block the passing lanes to the midfield.
Oh, so they're forcing them into bad decisions.
Exactly. They effectively forced the young Ivorian defenders to either launch a desperate, inaccurate long ball or try to dribble out of trouble in their own defensive third, which is incredibly dangerous.
And that high-wire act almost resulted in a disaster for Côte d'Ivoire almost immediately.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw moments of absolute heart-and-mouth panic.
Oh, for sure.
The first really glaring example comes from Ecuador's John Uboa. He capitalizes on one of those exact defensive errors outside the box that you just described.
Precisely. The press forces a heavy touch, the ball spills loose, and Yeboah doesn't even take a moment to think. He just pounces and unleashes a venomous left-footed strike from distance.
And it crashes perfectly against the crossbar, the sound of it echoing around the stadium. It was so loud.
And the Ivorian goalkeeper, Yahia Fofana, didn't even move. He was completely beaten.
He was a statue. But the pressure didn't stop there, because shortly after that, Ecuador slices through them again, this time in transition.
Right, the Pedro Vite pass.
Yes. Pedro Vite threads this perfectly weighted through ball that totally dissects the Ivorian backline. It finds Alan Minda, who sets himself, opens up his body, and hits a beautiful curling shot.
And again, it rattles the crossbar. That is twice in the first half where the goalkeeper is stranded, the defense is beaten, and the physical frame of the goal is the only thing keeping the score level.
It honestly felt like the Ivorian goal frame had this magnetic force field around it. It felt like supernatural luck bailing out a team that was drowning under the lights.
It feels like magic, sure, but there's an actual geometric reason for it. We have to give credit to the Ivorian defensive midfielders, Franck Kessie and Seko Fofana.
Okay, break that down for me, because they looked like they were barely hanging on.
Well, yes, Ecuador was dominating possession and forcing errors, but Kessie and Fofana were purposely clogging the absolute center of the penalty box. They weren't relying on luck.
So they were conceding the wide areas.
Yes, they were actively forming a physical barricade that forced Ecuador's shooters out to the fringes. When Yeboah and Menda took those shots, they were taking them from 20 or 25-degree angles outside the primary shooting zones.
I see.
When you are forced to shoot from those acute angles, hitting the inside of the post or the crossbar is mathematically often your only viable trajectory past the keeper.
That makes so much sense. They bent under the pressure, but by controlling the geography of where the shots came from, they drastically reduced the probability of those shots going in.
Exactly.
And it wasn't an entirely one-sided slaughter either. Even while surviving that pressure, Côte d'Ivoire managed to remind Ecuador that they had teeth.
Yes, they did have moments.
Like Bazoum, the player who controversially started. Instead of Ahmad, he managed to break away and drive a low shot that forced a full stretch fingertip save from Hernan Galindez, the Ecuadorian keeper.
And the importance of that save goes way beyond just keeping the ball out of the net. In a game defined by pressing, a counterattack like that acts as a release valve.
Because it scares the other team.
Precisely. It forces the Ecuadorian defense to take a half step back. It puts a thought in their minds: if we push too high, they can hurt us. And that tiny kernel of doubt is what eventually allowed the Ivorian midfield to finally catch their breath.
So if the woodwork is saving Côte d'Ivoire, and their defense is forcing these difficult angles, we have to ask how Ecuador is continually getting the ball into those dangerous fringe positions so easily in the first place.
Right.
And that answer lies almost entirely with one man anchoring the midfield. We have to talk about Moises Caicedo.
Oh, absolutely. To understand why Ecuador looks so dangerous, you have to look at Caicedo's role. He isn't just a defensive destroyer, and he isn't a traditional attacking playmaker either.
So what is he?
He operates as a metronome. He dictates the entire rhythm of how his team moves up the pitch.
The data on his performance from Crypto Briefing is just staggering. In the absolute chaos of a World Cup midfield, he posted a 92% pass accuracy.
Which is insane for a midfielder.
Right. And to be clear, these weren't just safe sideways passes back to his defenders. He delivered 3 key passes that directly unlocked the Ivorian defense. How does a player maintain that level of precision when he is constantly surrounded by opposing players trying to tackle him?
It comes down to his spatial awareness and his body orientation. Before Caicedo even receives the ball, he has already scanned the pitch 3 or 4 times.
Like he has a map in his head.
Exactly. He knows exactly where the pressure is coming from. So when the ball arrives, he receives it on the half turn, meaning his body is already angled toward the opponent's goal rather than his own.
Oh, so he doesn't have to stop and turn around.
Exactly. This allows him to bypass the initial wave of the Ivorian press with a single touch, opening up the entire field to pick out those key passes. And remember, there was massive anxiety about whether he would even be allowed to play in this tournament.
Right. There was real pre-tournament drama because he picked up disciplinary bans during those grueling South American qualifiers. Everyone was waiting on FIFA to clarify the rules.
Exactly. The Ecuadorian camp was holding its breath until FIFA officially confirmed that those qualifying suspensions wouldn't carry over into the group stage.
Thank goodness they didn't.
Yeah, and his presence justified all that anxiety. He was a masterclass in transition. He would break up an Ivorian attack, win the ball, and within 2 seconds, he had delivered a progressive pass to restart Ecuador's offense.
Okay, here's where I want to push back on the narrative a little bit, though.
Okay, go ahead.
If Caicedo is playing the perfect game, if his body orientation is flawless, if his passing is at 92%, and he's delivering these 3 key passes, why does the data show that Ecuador's expected goals, or XG, was only 1.01 for the entire match?
That's a great question.
Because for the listener, XG basically measures the quality of a scoring chance. A tap in into an empty net from 2 feet away is nearly a 1.0. A wild, desperate strike from 40 yards out through traffic is like a 0.02. So an XG of just 1.01 across a staggering 12 shots means Ecuador was taking incredibly low percentage shots. Does the blame for that fall on the Ecuadorian forwards for making bad decisions, Or is this back to Kessie and Fofana doing the dirty work?
I think it really highlights the brilliance of the Ivorian defensive pivots. You can play a beautiful symphony in the middle third of the pitch, which Caicedo absolutely did.
He definitely did.
He progressed the ball flawlessly. But once the ball entered the final 25 yards, the environment changed completely. Kessie and Fofana didn't try to tackle Caicedo high up the pitch. They dropped deep, stayed incredibly compact, and essentially told Ecuador, you can have the ball out wide, but you cannot enter the center of the penalty area.
So they were just walling them off.
Exactly. So Caicedo's key passes were finding forwards who immediately had two Ivorian defenders blocking their path to the goal. The forwards weren't necessarily choking, they were simply running out of real estate.
Which perfectly sets up the massive turning point in this game. Because while Kessie and Fofana were absorbing all that pressure in the middle, Côte d'Ivoire realized they had a mismatch on the right flank.
Oh boy, did they ever.
And this is where we see the birth of a genuine breakout star. I want to talk about Yan Diomande. Because being a teenager at a World Cup is one thing, but making an elite defender look completely lost is entirely different.
The word historic gets thrown around a lot in sports, but Diomande's debut truly warrants it.
Absolutely.
At 19 years and 212 days old, he became the first teenager to ever make an appearance for Côte d'Ivoire in a FIFA World Cup match, and he walked away with the Superior Player of the Match award.
His statistical footprint on this game is wild. He registered 5 key passes and created one officially categorized big chance. But the story of his match is really defined by his isolated one-on-one battle with Ecuador's left-sided defender, Piero Hincapié.
That matchup was brutal.
It was. The tracking data shows Diomande successfully dribbled past Hincapié 4 separate times in this match. That is the highest number of times any single defender has been beaten off the dribble in the entire tournament so far.
And to truly appreciate how difficult that is, you have to understand Pierre Hincapié's pedigree. He plays for Arsenal in the Premier League. He spends his weekends defending against some of the fastest, most technically gifted wingers on the planet.
Right, he's not a scrub.
Not at all. To give you some context, over the entirety of last season for Arsenal, spanning 39 appearances, Hincapié was only dribbled past 19 times in total.
Wow.
Yeah, that averages out to being beaten roughly once every 2 full games.
And a 19-year-old does it to him 4 times in 90 minutes. How does that even happen tactically? Hincapié doesn't just suddenly forget how to defend.
No, it comes down to isolation and structural support. At Arsenal, Hincapié usually has a dedicated defensive midfielder covering his inside shoulder, creating a 2-on-1 advantage against the winger.
So he usually has backup.
Exactly. But in this match, because Ecuador was pushing so hard to find a goal, Hincapié was often left completely isolated on an island against Diomande, and Diomande exploited it beautifully.
What was his specific technique?
He stayed incredibly wide chalk on his boots, as they say, forcing Hincapié to step out toward the touchline. Once Hincapié stepped out, Diomande used a sheer, explosive change of pace to knock the ball past him into the space behind.
And looking at Diomande's backstory, this level of performance isn't just a flash in the pan. He was born in Abidjan, but he developed his game in Europe. He currently plays for RB Leipzig in the German Bundesliga.
He's been tearing it up there.
Yeah, in his debut season there, he scored 12 goals and provided 9 assists, eventually winning the Bundesliga Rookie of the Season award. He's currently valued at around 90 million euros, and the rumors are that clubs like Liverpool are heavily circling him.
He represents this new generation of African talent that combines the traditional flair and athleticism with incredibly rigorous modern European tactical schooling.
That makes him so dangerous.
It does. But what makes his performance truly resonate is the emotional context surrounding it.
Yes, his post-match interview was incredibly moving. After running himself into the ground and winning the Player of the Match award, he immediately dedicated it to his mother, who is currently recovering from a major operation back home.
That was really touching.
It was. And he spoke so openly about the immense psychological burden of the tournament. He said, and I quote, "It's tough and it's stressful because we're representing nearly 33 million people. We're playing for our families, our friends, our loved ones. We want to make our mark on history."
When you hear a quote like that, you realize these aren't just tactical chess pieces. They are young men carrying the hopes of an entire nation.
Absolutely.
And you could physically see that desire to make history catalyze a shift in the team's posture as the game progressed.
Which brings us to the climax of the second half, because Immerse Faye's team came out of the locker room after halftime, and whatever he said to them worked.
It was like watching a different team.
Totally. The fear that defined their first half was gone. The nerves had clearly settled, and the dynamic of the match completely inverted. Côte d'Ivoire started pushing higher, and Ecuador began to retreat.
But not before the goal frame intervened one more time.
Of course, it couldn't just be a normal game. Early in the second half, Ecuador's captain, the veteran striker, Enter Valencia, finds a sliver of space at a very tight angle. He smashes a shot and a cannon squarely off the post.
That is the third time Ecuador hit the woodwork in this match, and it places them in a deeply agonizing, highly specific historical category.
I don't know what category.
With this loss, Ecuador became only the fourth team since 1966 to hit the woodwork 3 times and lose a World Cup match.
Ouch.
Yeah. They joined the United States team from 1998 against Germany, Brazil from 1990 against Argentina, and Italy from 1978. It's a devastating statistical club to be a part of.
Talk about cursed company. But Côte d'Ivoire immediately responded in kind to prove the margins were tight on both ends. Yan Diomande, continuing his absolute terrorization of Hincapie down the right flank, cuts inside and sets up Eli Wahi.
And Wahi hits a brilliant first-time strike.
He makes perfect connection, and it smashes off the crossbar.
Yeah.
That is 4 total woodwork strikes in one match.
But that Wahi chance was the final signal of a massive tactical shift. Mersfay noted after the game that his team explicitly decided to abandon their caution.
They just went for it.
They did. They pushed their fullbacks higher up the pitch, essentially pinning Ecuador back into their own defensive third.
And this is where the psychology of tournament management becomes fascinating to me. Ecuador's coach, Sebastian Bakacec, admitted in his press conference that as the second half wore on, he actively made adjustments to secure at least a draw. Think about the psychology of that. You are a team on a 19-match unbeaten run. You dominated the midfield. You hit the post 3 times. Why, as a manager, do you suddenly instruct your team to stop trying to win and settle for a 0-0 draw?
It's the classic gambler's dilemma, amplified by the format of a World Cup group stage. When a team creates high-quality chances, executes their game plan, and still hits the post 3 times, a creeping psychological dread begins to set in on the touchline.
Like they feel like it's just not their day.
Exactly. The manager starts to believe that the football gods simply aren't smiling on them today. The Cani saw the momentum completely shifting. He saw Diomande consistently carving up his left side.
Yeah, that had to be terrifying to watch from the bench.
It was, so he calculated the tournament math. Securing 1 point against a very dangerous African side is infinitely better than throwing men forward, getting caught on a counterattack, losing the match, and instantly killing your 19-match streak.
So he tried to lock the back door to guarantee survival. But the back door was violently kicked in right at the end. And the fascinating thing about the 90th minute breakthrough is that it wasn't initiated by a winger or a striker. It was born from a central defender, Wilfried Singo.
This is exactly what happens when tactical rigidity breaks down under the weight of exhaustion and individual bravery just takes over.
It was incredible to watch.
Remember, Singo is only playing center back because of the pre-match injury to Evan Ndika. In modern football, in the 90th minute of a 0-0 draw, your center back is heavily programmed to stay glued to his own penalty area to prevent a late counterattack.
Right, crossing the halfway line is almost universally forbidden.
Exactly. But Singo just decides to break the programming. He identifies a gap, and he surges from deep inside his own half.
He carries the ball, driving straight through the exhausted Ecuadorian midfield, bypasses Caicedo, and runs all the way into the Ecuadorian penalty area. How does a center back find that much unmarked territory?
He found it precisely because of Bekaseshi's adjustments.
Oh.
Because Ecuador had consciously dropped deep into a low block to secure the draw, their forwards and midfielders had retreated, giving up the high press that was so effective in the first half.
So they essentially gave Singo a completely uncontested runway.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the time the Ecuadorian defenders realized a center back had joined the attack, the structural overload was already too much. Singo gets into the box and provides a perfectly weighted, low pass across the face of the goal.
And who is there arriving at the back post to meet it? Amad Diallo.
The man of the hour.
The man who was controversially left on the bench. The man whose absence had everyone questioning Mersfay's sanity just 2 hours prior. He arrives at the exact right millisecond, and he doesn't panic. He doesn't smash it blindly.
No, he was so cool under pressure.
He expertly caresses the shot into the bottom corner. Hernan Galindez is finally beaten, and there's no metal crossbar to save him this time.
It is the ultimate cinematic vindication for a manager. Faye absorbs the criticism, holds his most lethal weapon in reserve, introduces him against heavy, tired legs, and delivers the fatal blow exactly when Ecuador is mentally preparing for the final whistle.
Ahmad's post-match quote really stuck with me because it was so chillingly calm given the context. He said, "We came here to make history. We stayed composed and remained focused."
To have that level of internal quiet, that ice-cold focus in the 90th minute of a World Cup opener is staggering.
It really is. And that single swing of Ahmad's boot didn't just win 3 points, it triggered a massive shockwave through the historical record books. The aftermath of this 1-0 result ripples out far beyond the confines of Group E.
The aftermath is incredibly spicy.
Let's start with the immediate reaction from the Ecuador manager, Sebastián Beccatecha. He was visibly frustrated in his press conference. He flat out called it an unfair defeat.
I mean, you could see the anger on his face.
His exact quote was, "I never felt they deserved to win the match, but football is not about what you deserve. It's about taking your chances."
You can entirely understand his perspective from a purely statistical standpoint. His team controlled the tempo, Caicedo delivered elite passing metrics, and they hit the frame of the goal 3 times.
Right.
In Beccacechi's mind, they executed the blueprint perfectly and were punished by a statistical anomaly.
I understand his pain, but I have to push back on the premise, and I really want you, the listener, to consider this. Is there actually any such thing as an unfair defeat in football if you hit the post 3 times?
It's a great philosophical question for the sport.
Because the post is out of bounds. Hitting the post is, by definition, missing the target. Is finishing your dinner the absolute only metric of fairness that actually matters?
From a purist's perspective, yes. Football is entirely a game of outcomes. The goal is the only objective truth. You can play a beautiful, flowing symphony in the midfield, which Caicedo absolutely did, but if you do not put the ball between the white lines, you haven't completed the task.
Right.
Hitting the post isn't bad luck. It is a micro-failure of precision. The geometry of the goal doesn't change.
Exactly. It's a game of inches, and they missed by an inch. But beyond the fairness debate, let's look at the broader historical shifts this match triggered, because we are witnessing a genuine restructuring of global football power right now.
The historical milestones from this match are monumental. Most notably, this was the very first time in history that Côte d'Ivoire has defeated a South American team in a World Cup.
That's a huge deal.
It is. Prior to this, they suffered a painful string of losses against CONMEBOL teams, a 2-1 loss to Argentina in 2006, a 3-1 loss to Brazil in 2010, and a 2-1 loss to Colombia in 2014.
So that is a massive 2-decade-old monkey finally lifted off their back. But if you zoom out even further, you see a much larger continent-wide trend emerging.
Yeah, the broader stats are crazy.
African teams are now incredibly unbeaten in 3 consecutive World Cup games against South American opponents. This streak started with Cameroon beating Brazil and Qatar in 2022, continued with Morocco drawing against Brazil earlier in this current tournament, and now Côte d'Ivoire taking down Ecuador.
And on the flip side, you have a full-blown crisis brewing for South America.
Oh, yeah.
With Ecuador's loss today, combined with Paraguay's loss and Brazil's earlier draw, CONMEBOL teams failed to win any of their first 3 matches in a World Cup for the first time since 1974.
Since 1974. That is over a half-century of expected dominance that is suddenly looking incredibly fragile. What is driving that shift?
It speaks directly to the rapid tactical maturation of African football. For decades, the lazy, stereotypical punditry surrounding African teams was that they relied solely on raw athleticism and individual flair, but lacked structural discipline.
Right, that was always the tired talking point.
Exactly. Teams like Côte d'Ivoire and Morocco are completely dismantling that narrative. They are defensively cohesive, they understand complex pressing triggers, they are tactically flexible enough to shift from a low block to a high press mid-game.
And they have the talent to execute it.
Right, they have young superstars like Diomande who are being developed in the most rigorous tactical academies in Europe. They aren't just outrunning teams anymore, they are outthinking them.
And that reality totally inverts the pressure as we look ahead to the rest of the group stage. Ecuador's incredible 19-match unbeaten streak is dead in the water.
It's gone.
They are sitting on 0 points, and their margin for error is entirely gone as they prepare to face a massive powerhouse in Germany, followed by tournament debutants Curacao.
Meanwhile, Côte d'Ivoire sits comfortably at the top of Group E. They have 3 points in the bank. They have a defense that just proved it can withstand a South American onslaught, and they have a young, fearless squad that just proved to themselves that they belong on the absolute biggest stage in the world.
It sets up an incredibly compelling narrative for the rest of the tournament. So let's quickly summarize what we've unpacked today.
Sure.
We saw Immerse Faye take a massive managerial gamble by benching his star player, only to watch Amad Diallo deliver the game-winning heroics in the 90th minute. We witnessed the birth of a terrifying new global superstar in 19-year-old Yande Omande, who completely dismantled an elite Premier League defender.
We analyzed Moises Caicedo's unrewarded midfield mastery.
And we broke down a game defined by the absolute narrowest of margins, featuring 4 strikes off the goal frame.
It was a tactical puzzle that ultimately came down to composure in the final dying seconds of the match.
Which brings me back to where we started. We talked about flipping coins and probabilities. But I want to leave you with a final lingering thought about the true nature of this sport and how we construct narratives.
Go for it.
If John Yeboah's first half shot for Ecuador drops just 1 single inch lower, it hits the underside of the crossbar and goes in. Ecuador likely takes that momentum and wins this game 3-1.
Very true.
If that happens, we spend this entire deep dive talking about a South American tactical masterclass, the genius of Bekasesi's pressing system, and the naive, youthful errors of an Ivorian team that just wasn't ready for the big stage.
The narrative completely flips.
Exactly. Instead, the ball hits the face of the bar and bounces out. Singo makes a miraculous run in the 90th minute. Amad scores. And suddenly, we were sitting here talking about an African football renaissance, the brilliant foresight of Immerse Faye, and an aging South American confederation that is choking under pressure.
It really puts things in perspective.
So as you go about your day, ask yourself this: how much of the history we accept as definitive analytical truth is actually just the result of a 1-inch margin of luck?
It's a haunting question, and it's exactly why we love the game.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.